for it one way or the other. So I don't know what the arguments are going to be for or against, and we get this all the time. It's like hitting your head against that proverbial brick wall, and it doesn't actually get you anywhere. It's like we're actually tied, our hands are tied behind our backs with all the political nonsense and the laws they try to overthrow the whole system and country with, because the councils are complicit, the judges, the lawyers, the police services, the hospitals. Every single thing is that they've got like an army. You might be a foot infantry soldier, but if you look over your shoulder, it's an army that's coming after you.
Yeah, the reason was coming on tonight, it was basically to tell people what could happen to them if they got raided. Any one of you who speaks out, you're at risk of being raided, and the intention won't be to take you down the criminal justice route, because they want this to be kept quiet. They want to silence you. They don't want it coming out in an open court. They don't want you doing statements. So that was the gist of the attack on me. So they police arrived at my house in Somerset. I opened the door and they pushed in, and they came in. I was promptly told by the woman, police constable, that I was arrested. They started the search of my house. They seized my phone, they seized my computer upstairs. Then they started to look at my bookshelf. And that got very interesting, because there was 3 sort of sections of books. One were written by former police officers, Maggie Oliver, John Wedger, Mike Hames, the head of the Mets, former head of the Mets paedophile unit. There was all these books written by these officers, some of whom I know, all about child abuse, all about care homes. And that got their attention. Then the other books were written by victims like Meat Rack, like Tom Daly, and Teresa Cooper from the care home she was in, where she was drugged and raped. So there was 2 sets of books, but there was another section of books that they took a particular interest in. One of them was a book written by Staff Sergeant Steve Pratt, 22 SAS, and it's titled "The Making of a Dangerous Individual. I Don't Want to Kill Your Children." And they looked at that, and the title alone was going to cause problems. And Steve had written something inside to me. But what the police didn't understand is why I had all these books is because I'd been given funding to do a PTSD book all about trauma and how to do it based on my and other people's experience. And Steve had been in the army. By the time he was 21, he was in the SAS. He reached the rank of staff sergeant, but he became too dangerous. He was going to kill his own colleagues. And he fled. Well, he left and he went to live in the north of Finland. And he now has come back and is now going around schools and doing radio podcasts, telling people not to join the military. And the trigger for Steve was that he was sexually abused in a school when he was a youngster. And that is what's made him what he was.
Wow.
And so that was the basis of that book. There were other books written by people who served in a unit called the DET, or to give it its full name, 14th Intelligence Company. These people were selected from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and men and women. About 5 out of 100 got through, and they went undercover in Northern Ireland and in England. And for every explosive device that was designated, they saved about 15 bombs going off.
Wow.
Of course, she got to see all this, and so they were quiet about it, but they obviously paid a lot of attention. So anyway, I get taken to Bridgewater Police Station, custody centre. The support worker I had, because I have to have EpiPens and other things because of this phosphate poisoning, they didn't know how to administer them, so she insisted that she came with me. And we were driven to, they weren't physical against me, it was just the intimidation.
Yeah.
And I had a headway, wearing at the time, I had a T-shirt on, and the T-shirt was Veterans United Against Suicide. And so that should have sent alarm bells straight away. It wasn't for my benefit. I'm involved with a lot of people who have been through trauma like me, and I just passed my experiences on with them. And anyway, we got to the police station, and we saw the custody sergeant, and I handed over a brain injury identity card, the headway one. And they're very hard to get hold of. They're not easy. You have to have a diagnosis from a consultant neurologist and all that. And I hand over the EpiPens, and I asked for a headway appointed brain injury lawyer. And they then took me down into the custody cells with the support worker, the appropriate adult. They put me in a cell, but the cell door was left open and guarded by police. They didn't lock it. And I'm thinking, this is interesting. Then they took me, after about 10 minutes, to see a G4S nurse. My request to her for a doctor wasn't actioned. And she wrote that I was fit to be questioned. So I got taken back to the cell, put back in the cell with the support worker, door left open, guarded by police. Then not long after, 2 paramedics arrived, so I felt a little bit safe. But then by their behaviour, I thought, these aren't paramedics. I reckon these are mental health nurses. Then a third person arrived, dressed all in black, a woman called Carly. And they were mental health nurses. And for almost 2 hours, they goaded me, they provoked me, they gaslighted me, antagonized me to thing. And the female nurse, Kylie Reynolds, was insisting that I agreed to see a psychiatrist. And she just went on and on, goading me. But what was interesting, while this was going on, one of the mental health nurses removed the appropriate adult from me in the police custody cell, leaving me all on my own with the police, with the mental health nurses, without a solicitor present. Now, that is a criminal offence under PACE. They're not allowed to do that, but they did.
Was there no recording?
Oh, there's about, how many? Around about 100 cameras and microphones in Bridgewater Police Custody Centre.
Right.
Would you believe they all got deleted within 4 weeks?
I've heard that so many times. When push comes to shove in many a case, and we've got Jack here joining us. And good evening, Jack, and thanks for joining us. But even when we've asked for evidence in certain things, you get the same old chestnut. The footage was deleted when it was put back on its docking station, or it didn't download, or whatever the case might be. And it's strange, they're saying, well, I'm recording anyway, so blah, blah, blah. Well, I know you being a data protection, a person that handles data protection, right, you've got my detail, I'll have a copy of that. But when you try to get anything that's on you, it's a different kettle of fish. But they can say all these things and make false claims against you, and virtually, not saying virtually, have done. I think there's been, in the last 3 years, 1,800 incidents in police custody. I think it's 1,800, and some of them have been murders.
Yeah, well, what happened, my friend Jimmy Johnson, who runs Veterans in Prison, now he's been in prison 45 years, is presently in Franklin, maximum security. He's ex-army.
Yeah.
Ex-army, and suffered from trauma. He's murdered 2 people because of he went into,
I think it's a cat A, isn't it?
yeah, psychotic state and killed 2 people. But he's taken to writing all about PTSD, and I'm going to send you Break Off. And he wrote one book, The Veteran Survival Guide.
Yeah.
That was endorsed by 5 Army General Dannett, General Ransbottle, and others, and the brigadier in charge of the SAS. He's endorsed his books. So it's a really, yeah, I mean, he rang me today. He's allowed to ring me once a week from prison, and we talk. And anyway, Jimmy had written a book about break off, and what break off means effectively: when you come under extreme confrontation, don't engage, step back and disengage, and don't get pulled into it, and don't. So I applied that technique. It sent me the book out about 2 weeks earlier before I got arrested, and I sent 20 copies to various police forces. And Martin Hewitt, the head of the National Police Chief Council, who at the time had served in the army for about 8 years. So armed with that knowledge, not to get engaged with these nurses, not to shout at them, not to get provoked by them, not to get confrontational with them, I backed off and just took 2 further steps. And in the end, they gave up.
Wow.
And they left. Then after about 30 minutes, I got taken upstairs at about 6 o'clock at night for questioning under police caution by a now former detective inspector and a detective constable. An ordinary police constable, the woman who arrested me. But little did they know the background. They didn't know about the National Crime Agency being involved, monitoring it. They didn't know that they may not have known that the chief superintendent had been referred for obstruction of justice in my case. But isn't it interesting that chief superintendent, Claire Arms, was in charge of all the custody units when I got arrested and put in there, and she had total control. She stepped down after 3 days, then got transferred to the College of Policing. And we got upstairs, we talked, and I went into an area what they didn't like. I went into Freemasonry.
Right.
And they mentioned Simon Oliver's family. Then I said, yeah, there'd been a meeting at the United Grand Lodge of England about Simon Oliver and about these children, what he's been doing to these children, taking them from their mothers. And some of these mothers have had to leave the United Kingdom and go and live abroad with their children so that they can keep them. And of course, it then starts to get very interesting. Now, they wouldn't want that going in court. And on the police files, it says not in the public interest to take to court. So that was why they were trying to section me. And
they did with Mel, because she was a part of it.
Yeah, I know. And I was thinking of her at the time. And what I didn't know, these mental health nurses, Bruce Matthews, what was his name? Benjamin McAvoy, had gone into my medical records in that police station. They got access to my medical records, and I had signed a dispensation so that my medical records are not held electronically. That was a load of rubbish. They're all obtained electronically. Yeah. So the mental health nurses got in there. And then they read them all, but more importantly, they started to put adverse comments in there. Mm-hmm. And they wrote, signed the Official Secrets Act on more than one occasion, covert operations, Northern Ireland. That had all been put on my med by these nurses. And I'm thinking, what's going on? I didn't know that at the time. And the police had obviously fed them a lot of information as well. Anyway, I get released under investigation for a year. And I had two very interesting visitors. I don't know who they were. They came. I think it's the security services. They questioned me. They psychologically assessed me from about 11 in the morning till 7 at night.
Yeah.
Then they debriefed me on Avon and Somerset Police and Avon and Somerset Mental Health Trust. Fully debriefed me.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'd spoken to the National Crime Agency again. I think there's about 12 calls to the National Crime Agency in all. And then the very next day, because the police hadn't been able to have me sectioned, I get a phone call from a woman, mental health nurse from Minehead called Karen Mackey. And she said, "You signed to agree to see a psychiatrist." I said, "I didn't. I was bullied into seeing it with the rights to withdraw that consent." And she said, "You're going to see a psychiatrist in 5 days' time." I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Then I'm going to send a psychiatric crisis team to your house tomorrow morning." I said, "Will that include a psychiatrist?" She said, "Yes, it would." And to me, someone like me, I was fortunate I had some people around me then, but how many people would have survived that? Many veterans would have gone on the run. Some maybe could commit suicide, or others would have been all tooled up with guns or whatever, and there'd have been one hell of a big entourage because the police would have come with them. How dangerous. And these mental health nurses were meant to safeguard you, protect you, care for you.
Yeah.
It's not. It's weaponized.
Let me just for a second, just want to bring in Charles for a second and see what Charles makes of what you've been saying, because he's been listening quite, sitting in the background, listening to it all, like myself. And Charles' knowledge is second to none. And he's seen cases like this. He's had dealings with all the different sort of bodies that there are out there, especially with the forces, and so on and so forth. Charles, what do you make of what Leonard's been saying so far?
Well, basically, it doesn't shock me, if you know what I mean. I know it happens. And there'll be loads more than Leonard, what I mean, sort of thing. And it's about time, they got brought to account. Because basically what I said to you today, Alan, Article 30 of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's Article 17 of the Convention Law, which is the ECHR, and also the Human Rights Act 1998, it states no state, which means government, United Kingdom, no group, police, court, Department of Works and Pensions, no person, means any individual, can interfere with your human rights or all this lot. So what are they doing to Leonard? What are they doing to many other people?
Fortunately, I've got the support which has enabled me to open this all up. So, she threatened me with a mental health thing, with a consultant psychiatrist coming the next day, but they never came. And it was arranged that I would have an immediate medical assessment by a doctor, nothing to do with the trust. And I went and saw him. A man from the Navy, former Navy, came with me, and I was perfectly sane. Nothing wrong with me.
But Charles, Leonard, if we sign up to all these convention laws and all these treaties, and as Charles has just highlighted a couple of sections of the Human Rights Act. Now, what I don't understand in all of this is how we can treat illegal immigrants differently to anybody else. And surely, like Charles has said, doesn't the category of illegal immigration come into the Dublin Agreement or the Dublin Treaty? Is it the Dublin Treaty, Charles?
Well, basically, comes under Article 1 of the Human Rights Act Convention Law. Anybody within your jurisdiction get our human rights. So basically, them all coming over on the rafts and all this lot, boats sort of thing. As soon as they cross the line between France and to England, they're covered. But there again, as I said to you today, Alan, I think it's the Dublin 2000 Treaty, where basically these illegals, most of them are illegal, travel across all these different borders, but they can claim asylum, so they say, in England, United Kingdom.
How under that Dublin Treaty can they seek asylum. I thought the Dublin Treaty was if there was some sort of crime committed that they couldn't come for seek asylum in a foreign country or another country under the Dublin Treaty if they'd committed a crime. Now, by crossing from France to this country and doing what they do with their passports and information and going from one country to another country, isn't that breaking the law?
Yeah. And basically, you can't use the Human Rights Act if you've broken the law. And they're breaking the law. Yeah, but is that the Dublin
Treaty, though, that people don't talk about?
Yeah. So basically, why ain't the government using it?
And anyway,
why ain't the government using it?
Yeah.
Alan, just jumped it. What I did a subject access request to Somerset NHS Foundation Trust. I got a partial disclosure, heavily redacted. I applied again, a little bit more, heavily redacted.
We've seen that.
They said I had to go to the Information Commissioner. Fortunately, Stephen Eckersley, the director at the Information Commissioner's office, accelerated it for a few, instead of waiting 6 weeks, it was dealt with basically immediately. And it didn't even need the Information Commissioner's input then, because the Calcott Guardian, the man in charge of all medical records at a health trust, in this case Somerset, intervened, and they made a full disclosure. And over 120 employees, staff at Somerset NHS Foundation Trust have entered my medical records. I'm going to release what they said. One of the most upsetting, I'm accused of beating up my wife and children.
Wow.
Medical. I'm going to publish it. I've got the name of the woman who's written it, the mental health nurse. I've got the date she entered my records and put it on it, the time she put it on it, her full details.
Have you been sending any of these to Charles? Do you know Charles's email?
No, I don't, but if you forward it to me later, we will, right?
Is that all right, Charles? You muted yourself.
Yeah.
Then the other,
very interesting stuff. Sorry, Leonard.
The other one, which could get me killed at any time. Some sick individual, again a mental health nurse, has written on there multiple threats of anthrax attacks against the public.
Wow.
And that is when MI5 got notified by me of these allegations. They spent an hour with me, and I fully debriefed them, gave them the National Crime Agency reference number. But what's happened to me has been uncovered, right? We've got it. We've got to stop this happening to other people. And that's why I came on tonight to sort of talk to you. But when you're on a custody cell and you're being attacked like you were with these mental health people,
yeah,
I mean, it's very, very hard to keep on a straight line. I was fortunate, a psychologist, international psychologist, who used to help set the exams for the British Psychological Society. He gave me an absolutely a massive psychological assessment, very deep, and didn't charge me at all for it, and published all the results for me. He was brilliant. I think they're called Men in Grey Men, as I just explained. I've had 2 visits from them. They knew things that no one would know. And because I used to fly the King, I used to fly Mrs. Thatcher, used to fly the Irish Teacher. I've been in the Navy. They know all that. They were very good. And I think the whole thing now, so many years have gone on, so many children and people, vulnerable people, have been abused. We've gone to these professional bodies, the Law Society, the Bar Standards Board, the General Medical Council. We're wasting our time. And when you start to look at them, the Nursing and Midwifery Council has undergone a major investigation at the moment for not recording. There's a massive investigation going on about Norfolk and Suffolk, and I think there's been 2,000 deaths and rapes on psychiatric wards.
Yeah.
Why has it taken a massive inquiry? Why didn't the Nursing and Midwifery Council build that up? I was told the Bar Standards Board files on my case have been destroyed 10 years ago. transpires I was lied to. They weren't destroyed, and I've got most of them
you
now.
Say bar standard or bar stalls?
Bar standards board, yeah. But it's the police disclosure which they've given me, and it unfolds the whole pattern. Now, the retired detective inspector was a Freemason who raided my house and questioned me and investigated me. Quite prominent in a relatively senior position, specifically in police Freemasonry. Now, he arrested me, searched my house, took me to the station. And when I was in that police station, I was talking about Freemasonry, how there'd been a meeting at London about this Judge Simon Oliver and the hierarchy of Freemasonry. Dr. David Staples, the chief executive, put the image of Freemasonry before that of little children and vulnerable people. Staples suddenly resigned when this all blew up with me. And but there's been many resignations, and there's a real...
That's the name you want to come across, Charles, isn't it? Judge Oliver.
Judge Simon Oliver, in fact.
Simon Oliver. I think you might have heard that name, Charles, might you?
What it is,
Probably.
what it all focuses around, Alan, someone, at the moment I'm accused of it now by the mental health nurses, but a man's been arrested, charged and put in prison for 8 years. Now, what happened, this website is called Judges Behaving Badly. He's on a Judge Simon Oliver. And someone created this website, and whoever did it has incredible IT skills, because they haven't been able to get it down in this country with all their thing, and it's still up there. Judges Behaving Badly. And this man wrote about his experience with Simon Oliver in court. Then other people started to write their cases. And I put my case up there, what had happened with this judge when he had conducted my case, when he weren't an authorised court of protection judge, and sent instructions to the Court of Appeal, which I've got. I can show you those instructions, making sure my appeal failed. I've got the email, and what he'd done, he'd taken the email off, put in red ink, then sent it, and we've recovered the whole lot.
How do you cope?
I was in the Royal Navy.
I know you and Charles were both in the Royal Navy. I know you're very minded men. But the
Royal Navy teaches you certain things. Hard to explain, but you're always conscious of time. You always want to be on time, well, 5 minutes early. You're conscious about your appearance, that your shoes are clean. Yeah. It's just little things like that. And yes, you may be slightly off the grid, but basically you want justice. You're disciplined, and that's not what we're seeing in our society at the moment.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So for most of my life then, I was regulated, disciplined. But when you go to courts now and you see the corruption, and it was interesting as we've dug deeper, much deeper, the Treasury solicitor is Susan McGibbon, and I was told by a senior barrister that the instructions accusing me of sending emails came on her instructions. So Susan McGibbon's the Permanent Secretary, Government Legal, and the head of the Treasury Solicitors. But she has another role, Alan, and many of your people may experience this. When you go up in litigation against government organisations, you often, and you have legal aid, you often get attacked by the Department of Works and Pensions, set up on pension fraud or something like that. So you have your legal aid taken off you. Susan McGibbon, as well as being the Treasury Solicitor, has a secondary role. She's Director General Legal for the Department of Works and Pensions.
It's funny you should say that, because I did something with Oliver Durden. He's been investigated at the moment. Oliver Durden, this is going off the subject slightly, but in the sphere of it all, it comes back to corruption. And what it was, in 1962, we had a thing called the Postmaster General.
Yeah,
and Charles and I sometimes talk about UPU law and the conventions that this country signs up to, all these various conventions with the human rights and convention law right across the board, UPU and everything else, and postal fraud. Now, Oliver Durden, right, when I wrote to him something about postal fraud and PO box fraud, right, he never replied to me. Now, he was supposed to be the Postmaster General. He's being investigated, and I'm sure he was part of the post office scam. Now, these people, and he, on top of his role as a ministerial role, he was getting a salary for being an MP. He was getting his expenses, all his expenses paid on his second home, heating and everything else. And he was getting additional salary for being Postmaster General. And a lot of these, they don't declare. Some of these people are on over £300,000 a year, you know.
Well, that sounds a lot of money, but I had a case in Reading. It lasted less than 10 minutes, court protection case. The judge wasn't a court protection judge, and I had a 10,000 cost order put on me by the judge down. The barrister Dominic Brazil did very well.
Wow.
So yeah, £10,000 for a 10-minute hearing when the judge is not authorised.
I've heard this so many times. It's just unbelievable. And Charles reiterates what I say in some of the things where he's done so much. I mean, me, you and Charles have been in about 5 courtrooms where they don't recognise Mackenzie. And although you are allowed self-representation, judges don't like it. They don't like it if you go up against them, because barristers that you have nowadays, right, are working for the other side 9 times out of 10. The corruption is just personified. It's just so. It's like an express train that's really, really gone off the rails. It's just gone beyond. I mean, what is politics?
They all know each other. They all know each other. The barristers, the solicitors. They're all friends. They go to functions.
Yeah.
One very interesting thing. It's written on the police logs and